So we're doing, a couple 100 pounds a week is kind of our average. And that's enough to sort of sustain a part-time person. When we started selling shiitake, what else can we get from you? Do you have oyster? Do you have lion's mane? And that's really the balance, I think, for us of figuring out, like, what things are we doing at what scale so that we're maintaining a happy quality of life and the land is happy at the end of the day. We're basically indoors, like pretending like this is a forest, kind of synthetically making it. So the blue light is actually the spectrum of light that is like filtered through the trees. So we've really focused on stewarding the forest that exists, and then where we don't have woods, like the open fields, like putting trees back in.
And it can be hard to pull the reins back a little bit. What is your like advice or recommendation on the scaling side of it? So you're Steve, and this is Wellspring Forest Farm.
You got it.
And you are doing some amazing things, mainly with mushrooms, right? We're standing right in the middle of your mushroom area.
Yeah.
Do you just call it your mushroom area? What do you call this?
This is the laying yard for the logs.
The laying
where the
yard.
logs come to lay.
Okay, awesome. So tell me a little bit about what we've got going on here, but how you got into all of this.
I got into all of this, really, my background is studying forestry and forest ecology, but kind of dropping out of school because I was told the only value of the forest was like managing for timber, which can be done sustainably, but it's not the only value. And growing up as a kid, I just loved the woods and wanted to spend time in it, and of course found all sorts of fun ways to interact. So that kind of like skepticism, I guess, led to learning about maple sugaring, and then learning about mushroom growing, and just different ways that we can see the woods as a valuable place to just enjoy, but also to steward and get some of our food and medicine from at the same time. So we really focused on stewarding the forest that exists, and then where we don't have woods, like the open fields, like putting trees back in, so that when we're all done with this farm thing, there's a forest behind versus, just a dilapidated field, which is what we found when we got here 13 years ago.
Now you're doing like mushroom growing instead of just like foraging, right?
Yeah, so we forage and sell that too, but we grow both outside, like on logs like this. So these are sugar maples that we thin the trees in our woods to maintain their health, and then inoculate the logs to grow the mushrooms. We also grow indoors, so we have other things like lion's mane and king oyster, and I can show you what that looks like as well.
Other than just being interested in forestry, I mean, I get it. As a kid, I grew up on a 300-acre row crop farm in Indiana, right? So very flat and lots of nothing.
Right.
But we did have a few sections of woods, and those were my favorite places to go. I'd go climb the trees, I'd go play in the creek. So I totally understand your love of that. But other than that, what value did you see in, or do you see in having a forest?
Yeah. Well, it's a good day to talk about it because it's going to be 90 today. So I don't like to be out in the field getting roasted by the sun. I like to be in the shade. So I think as the seasons get hotter, as we still work with the varying climate that we're experiencing, and we see it happening now on the farm every day, we want to see the forest as like a resilient, comfortable place to kind of ride out that wave of unknowns. It's much harder. We don't have to worry as much about irrigation in the forest. It's obviously just pleasant to be in here. We're buffering the climate. The trees are pumping out humidity. I mean, we're doing all sorts of things. It's a nice moderated climate to grow. We're growing our mushrooms in here. We're growing trees, like all these different things that are really challenging to even think about doing out in the field.
So you said these are your sugar maples, and when you're trimming them back, then you inoculate. So how do you inoculate them? How does the whole mushroom process work if you're doing it?
Yeah, well, we actually just did a class. One of our things we do is teach others how to do this. We started out with the raw logs that we cut. We showed folks how we cut them down and how we select the trees to make sure that they're the healthy, that we're leaving behind the healthiest trees, and we're taking the ones that are cull trees. And then we'll essentially drill a bunch of holes. I don't have all the setup, but you can see on these logs that we just did, we drilled holes.
But those aren't like holes, right? Or are they packed with
Yeah, they're packed. So we drill the holes, and then they're packed with the mushroom mycelium. So it's sawdust and the white kind of fluffy root-like material. That's the actual fungus itself. And so we plug the holes with that and then wax over them. And these grow out for about a year before they're ready to produce. So we're on a multi-year cycle here. You can see the logs we did earlier this spring, this white on the ends.
Oh, yeah.
That's really a good sign that the mycelium is moving through the wood. So probably next spring we'll start bringing these into production. And the way we manage that is we soak the logs. So we have some logs sitting in the tank here. They soak overnight, and like 24 hours or so.
Yeah.
And then they come out, and a few days later, they kind of look like this. Little pins just popping.
Are those
And
where
then,
the holes were drilled, or it just is anywhere?
Yeah, not always. They tend to just kind of start popping out anywhere. Because really what's happening is the mycelium is moving through the log, digesting the wood, and then using that as its food source to make mushrooms, which is its fruit. Mushrooms put out spores and try to, reproduce that way. So over the course of that week, they tend to get bigger and bigger. These are the ones that I'd say are mature, where they're kind of opened up and, ready to harvest. And that
so
sort
what
of thing.
kind of mushroom is that?
So these are all shiitake in the yard here.
What is their benefit? What do they do?
Well, they're delicious. Really useful in a wide range of dishes. As far as like medicinally, I mean, all mushrooms are really good for just balancing your immune system and keeping yourself just healthy. They're also they're called adaptogens, and so they are constantly helping regulate all sorts of different systems in your body for eating fresh, like live mushrooms. Just like any live food is kind of helping. Shiitakes taste really good. They're really easy to work into like a variety of dishes. And really good for your immune system. So really, we both eat a lot of fresh mushrooms. We also make medicinal extracts and like take those. It definitely helps us from getting sick and keeps the bad stuff away.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So it's like, what, almost a 2-year process to
really.
get it
Well,
going?
we inoculate usually every spring, and then we let them sit, and then the next year,
so it's like a 1-year process.
So kind of 1 year until they're in, and then these logs will produce for 2 or 3 seasons before they're spent.
Oh, really?
And then they just go back to compost in the woods. So it's a nice full cycle. Eventually, we're composting, building soil back in the forest.
Yeah.
This is what Mother Nature would do. We're just kind of sticking a mushroom in there that we're interested in growing and we can sell.
So what do the logs look like when they're spent? Are they like crumbly, like you kind of think of like
we look like they're kind of spent. They still have some wood left to them, But they'll occasionally pop a mushroom. But you can see this is the work that
very dry.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah, very soft.
And well, actually, the shiitakes eat the lignin, and then other fungus come in and eat the rest of the wood, which is mostly cellulose. Probably we'll see other things pop up. Nothing we're cultivating, but again, these will break down, and we have piles from previous years that just look like a pile of soil, essentially.
Does it help it break down easier versus if you were to go through and trim a forest and leave like the big piles? It would take a couple years, 3 or 4 years for that to decay.
Yeah, we're certainly because we're thinning the tree, like if a tree just died and fell down, it would eventually turn into soil.
Right.
We're definitely speeding that up because we're cutting them, we're inoculating them. So I think we're speeding that process up for sure.
Does having the mushroom inoculant in it already and it goes back, is that are you putting those mushrooms?
Not really.
Shiitakes
don't naturalize into the landscape. Some oysters, if you do other mushrooms, could, but mostly they stick to what you grow and don't get very far.
Haven't seen anything at this scale for both.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what you've got.
Yeah, I mean, we like growing the mushrooms outside. There's just not that many that you can produce reliably and take to market every week. So the main reason is we stick to the shiitakes outdoors, and then inside focus a little more on the other mushrooms that have a very small window of growing outside, like the lion's mane. So we're basically indoors, pretending like this is a forest, kind of synthetically making it. So the blue light is actually the spectrum of light that is filtered through the trees. And so that's why we're giving that to the mushrooms so they can develop proper color. And basically it's 90 degrees outside today, 65 in here, which is really what most of these mushrooms really thrive in 65 or 70.
Okay.
So we're just sort of keeping it basically in New York, it's April or May all year round in here, which allows us to keep growing these. So these are called black pearl oyster, like a king oyster variety that we grow. And these would not succeed outside. It'd be too hot.
There we go. Yeah. Now we're focused. Okay.
So there's our king oysters, really thick stems, really delicious.
And it's in the package in the medium.
Yeah, so we're basically making a log. It's just made out of sawdust and some nutrients like soy hulls and things like that.
Okay.
Mimicking what's going on out there, with a different recipe and kind of making the climate perfect for it. And then the other one we do a lot of is lion's mane. This one only fruits outside. We do grow some outside, but it only fruits in the fall.
Oh.
Really beautiful. They're a toothed mushroom, and so that's how they drop their spores. And this is really called the memory mushroom, so really good for cognitive function, treating any sort of memory condition, regrowing and strengthening nerve connections both in the brain but your whole nervous system.
Wow.
So really powerful mushroom medicinally.
Yeah.
It also tastes like seafood, really delicious crab, scallop type flavor.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Good on both sides of things.
I love that. Yeah, I've only seen pictures of it growing in the wild. So it's cool that you're able to grow it in here.
I mean, I love foraging. That's how I started. But I can only, there's a 2-week window when you find it in the woods. So it's nice to have it every week.
So you said you started foraging, but there's only a 2-week window. So can you talk to me a little bit on like the business aspect of it?
Yeah. So foraging is how I started finding mushrooms and getting just excited about them. But there's always these short windows for when a certain species will show up. And of course, if it ends up being too dry or even too wet, you don't get a nice mushroom. It's too wet and kind of saturated to sell. So it's a little bit of a fun treasure hunt, but when you're trying to build a customer base, they want something consistent. We started with the shiitake because it was easy to do. It was outside. We didn't have to, build a building and cool it and heat it and think about all those things. But then we started selling shiitake and people were like, what else? Oops, sorry. What else do you got? What else can we get from you? Do you have oyster? Do you have lion's mane? And if you're only harvesting, lion's mane for 2 or 3 weeks in the fall, the chef can't put it on the menu. And also in a bad year, we don't get any, and so we can't, make our tinctures or build any of these products. So we really needed a consistent weekly, yield to build a business. A lot of mushroom farms are all 100% indoors, but we really just want to ground all our work in the forest. So some combination of foraging and growing outside and growing inside is what we're trying to do as part of our business here.
So you mentioned chefs. So are you selling to restaurants as well as to individuals?
Yeah, so we have a CSA. Okay. So we partner with vegetable CSAs and offer the mushrooms as an add-on. So the customers there can choose if they want to get a bag of mushrooms every week. That's been our most solid customer base and sort of loyal following since we started 10 years ago with the CSA, which is really nice. And they help us ride through the times when things aren't going perfect. Second, we do restaurants, and that's kind of seasonal around here, a lot more in the summer, a lot less in the winter. Third is farmers markets and other kind of events where we can set up.
Because we did see you when we went to the Ithaca Farmers Market a couple weeks ago. We saw you there, and that's how I was like, oh, I recognize the book that you had on your table. Right. We need to talk.
Yeah.
So I love that you're able to work with other farms in the CSA, because so many people, we've talked about this a lot, but diversity versus focusing on one thing. And so I have seen people with mushrooms and then trying to do like a CSA model, but who wants only all just mushrooms? And then to grow a whole garden with it, I mean, that's just an extra enterprise. So the fact that you're able to stay focused on your mushrooms, but then also pair that with people who are already getting different vegetables. I mean, that's genius. That's awesome.
It's a win-win for everybody. And I think the vegetable CSAs can then differentiate, because the ones we go to also they also have a bread CSA add-on and a milk CSA add-on. So it becomes almost like a little supermarket of just local farms that are partnering and saying, we'll bring all our stuff to one spot. Rather than you got to drive around to all of our farms and try to pick stuff up. And for us, when we started this farm, we tried 10 different things and just realized over time that there was no way we were going to sustain it all.
Like what?
Oh, I mean, we had gardens, we started orchards, and we're looking at fruits, so we're looking at small berries. We did the grazing, we did ducks, we did duck meat, we did chickens, we did chicken broilers. I mean, we've kind of tried all these different things, and ultimately we had to find, what do we actually like spending our time doing? Where is there enough of a niche in the local market? There's actually plenty of people selling duck eggs around here, so the margins weren't there. But mushrooms are one thing around here that people aren't doing. Continued to gain interest, we continued to build markets. So other things have kind of fallen by the wayside, and we've really tried to focus in. But within the mushrooms, we're still trying to be diverse, where we get our mushrooms, how we grow them, what we're offering in terms of products. So there's still diversification, but it's not I'm constantly, when we started here, it was so much to try to maintain all these different systems, and we try to be a little more simple, and it's working better for us.
That's awesome. Yeah. So added with that diversity, where we're at now, you've got some sheep.
Yeah, we're gonna go a little further. Got to find them in the woods here.
I love this gate system. This is so genius.
Well, this is we actually borrowed this from our friend who's a hunter. This is a 3D fence.
Okay.
So this part that we just walked through, this part that's not electrified to kind of get ourselves around. But we have a lot of deer here, and we're planting tons of trees. I just planted probably 400 willow trees back there.
Oh wow.
And those are for both to benefit this sort of stream we have down there, but also they're fodder for the sheep. So we're thinking about what are different ways we can feed the sheep, not just on pasture, but also with trees.
Yeah.
That's been a big passion of ours. So the 3D fence is to keep the deer out. And it's a low-cost way to fence the perimeter, and that's why we had to
So you just use 2 fence lines?
Yeah, it's just the double in the back, the single in the front, and the spacing there. The theory is a deer comes up and doesn't feel like they can make that leap. So rather than having to build a permanent, 10-foot tall fence to try to get them out, this is a a way to do it much cheaper, and it's mostly working. I mean, it's not like it's a impenetrable fortress, but we've certainly rerouted them. They mostly go around it and kind of enjoy the rest of the woods. We don't need to kick them out entirely, but we don't want them nipping all the trees. That's the biggest thing. You plant a bunch of trees and a deer could, a herd of deer could destroy them in one night. So,
that's really cool. Yeah. I love that. I love that idea. That's awesome. Back to your diversity and enterprise. So you've got the mushrooms, and then you've got the sheep. Yeah. Why do you have sheep?
Well, it's one of those things that we're still figuring out. And I think we got here, we had 6 acres of pasture, and we're like, we don't want to mow this. There's no way. Yeah. That's not our interest. And I had managed a farm with some grazing cattle and really just enjoyed working with it and learning about rotational grazing and how that can be really beneficial for the soil. And we really wanted to see the health of the soil return here, really. It had been depleted it's been hayed for about 30 years. Oh, wow. Which is just a way to remove nutrition from the ground through that grass. So what's beautiful about grazing is you can sort of have them come through, graze, and through good management, I think you can see very quickly the soil and the biological diversity of those pastures start to return. So that was our original inspiration. And then it was like trying to see, can this be part of our business or not? So we've kind of increased and decreased our flock size over time. Sold, plenty of lamb to folks. Good overlap between folks that want to buy mushrooms and others that are interested in lamb. So it was very easy to sell any lamb we could produce. But ultimately, our land is mostly forested.
As we walk through a forest.
And this is like, from a forestry perspective, a pretty beat up forest. It was cleared at one point, kind of left to its own devices. The previous farmer we know chose to come through and kind of mine out every healthy old tree. And most of this landscape was like a thicket that you couldn't even walk through. So it's become this thing where we want to increase pasture and health. We also want to get the animals in and do what they do best, which is manage vegetation. Right. And our sheep are Katahdins. And they're a fabulous sheep. They're almost like a goat-sheep hybrid. Yeah. So they will happily eat grass, but they'll also happily munch on trees. What started out as a grazing, let's restore pasture health, has now become, let's also use them to restore the forest health, help us thin out a lot of this invasive brush, and really start to shift the ecosystem here. Yeah. And they've just been lovely. So really, we think of the animals on our farm primarily as like participating in ecosystem restoration. Okay. And the eggs or the meat that we get is really like a secondary benefit of that. Yeah, and so they've really been through a lot of this forest, you'll see, and they're doing amazing work. They do it much better than us. They're at it 24/7. Yeah. They love it. Some of the most invasive plants are some of their favorites to eat, so it works out for everybody.
Paul and I have talked, like when we settle down one day, what kind of animals do we want? And we keep coming back to, well, it depends on the property that we get. Yeah. It depends on what the land is requiring. So how long have you been here?
We've been here, this is our 13th year.
13 years. Yeah. Am I understanding this correctly? Has it kind of taken just that long for you to, like you said, not diversify so much and really figure out like what the landscape needs to get it, as a working ecosystem again?
I think it's good in the beginning to let yourself just play and try things, but not get too attached to them, because it took us a while to let go of some things because we were attached, and I think if we'd done that sooner, maybe we'd be a little better off. It's just a learning process. It's building a relationship with a place. It's considering what's been done to it before. I think it's, in most cases, like how it's been sort of abused, because most land's been kind of like hit pretty hard by a lot of farming. And how do we want to then, be in partnership with a restoration effort? And again, how does that like mix with how we want to spend our time and what we can sell locally?
So we got to your sheep. You've got the Premier One netting.
Of course.
And they are just happy. Look at them go. They're just eating up.
Yeah, so they're eating multiflora rose right now, which is, considered an invasive species and very thorny, very annoying to remove as a human, but they're happily munching away. They're supplementing with some, pasture stuff that we have. And again, it's a 90-degree day, so this is what I love about silvopasture as a concept is they're helping us maintain the woods here and shift sort of the ecosystem over time, but they're also just much happier than if they're out baking in the sun. We usually graze them in the pasture in the early spring in the open fields, and then move them up here, July and August when things are a little harder, and they do really well.
How much are you able to clear with them if you wanted to talk? Not necessarily get into like a production value to it, but as far as time is concerned.
So this is like a before shot. This is like, they just moved in here this morning.
Okay, so this is like brand new.
And then this is like the after, if that helps.
Oh, wow.
So
how long were they in here?
Probably 2 or 3 days.
Seriously?
Yeah. And one of the things we're doing is we're coming in and with a handsaw, just cutting some of the smaller trees that, don't have long-term forest value. So they're getting access to it. So there's a lot of brush over here that
you cut down.
They just stripped off, right? And so it's not like they're going to remove that. We still have to deal with that later. But they did kind of, mow this nicely down, and then anything they could reach, here's your after of the honeysuckle and the multiflora rose that they've completely cleared. And the question for us as the farm is, great, do we want to then cut it all down and turn this more into a grassy space, or do we actually encourage this to just resprout so that they can eat it again? So I think we're constantly trying to look at this as a mosaic of different types of vegetation, not something we're just going to clear everything and have a lawn here. And then ultimately the benefit is that we have these residual trees providing that canopy cover and becoming a healthier forest, down the line.
Yeah.
So it all kind of works together, and it's not like we're doing one thing uniform. So this paddock is very different than the next one. It's very different than the next one as we kind of move through the farm. From
your forestry background, I'm seeing a lot of talk right now on silvopasture. What is your opinion on the silvopasture conversation and mixed in with what you're doing here?
So this is, like I said before, marginal forest. It doesn't have healthy, really old trees. By and large, it's mostly a young, recovering forest after it was abandoned as farmland. So I always recommend to folks, if you have a really healthy, older, mature forest, not a good place to put animals. Where they do well is those areas that you can't walk through because there's so much thick brush, and pretty much every farm I've been on has some space that could use that attention. So the most marginal woody planted spaces, whether that's shrubby or hopefully some trees in the overstory, those are the places to think about putting silvopasture in, and leave the pristine, healthy forests to just be a healthy, pristine forest. Like our sugar maple woods is a good example. We don't put our animals in there. But back here where it's a little more mixed and could use the benefits of that, I think is a really good place for the animals.
Why would you say not to put animals in an established, mature forest?
Well, one thing is most established mature forests have a very dense canopy, so you're not going to get enough light down into the ground to actually establish good forage, which is our long-term goal, is to have a mix of woody stuff they can eat and good forage in the understory. The other thing is that we just need to preserve every healthy forest we have. There's just, in most of the U.S., especially the East Coast and into the Midwest, most of our forests have been a little beat up, and a lot of the older trees and the higher quality trees have just been harvested for a long time. If we have a healthy, intact forest, it's kind of beneficial for the larger community to keep it heading in that direction. And then really, if you put animals in there, they can tend to do damage over time. I think the biggest thing with silvopasture is folks think, I just stick the animals in the woods. But it's really putting the animals in the woods and managing them with intensive rotational grazing. So they're not there, if they're in any spot for too long, they can do damage. If they're in there for the right amount of time, they can do a lot of positive good.
Yeah.
And so it's really about that dance. And we have a grazing plan, we have a beautiful map, all that stuff, but it actually is coming out here, checking in, seeing what's going on, and making a decision about when that right time is to move, and not pushing it too far.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of goes back too to what you said about how long you've been here, that you kind of played around, and then it's important to play around and experiment and see not only what you like, but what does your land respond to? Because maybe somebody has your exact landscape 300 miles away,
right,
but their landscape isn't responding the way that yours is to what you're doing.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that that's awesome.
It's very site specific.
Yeah.
So our mushroom farm, people could replicate that anywhere in any situation pretty much, right?
Right.
The grazing feels a little more very specific to the site and the time, and even where we're at in the whole forest succession. We have to think about with the forest, hardwood forests are on a 150 to 300 year life cycle. It's a much longer, it's multiple generations of a cycle. It's very different than maybe annual vegetables or even mushrooms that are just a few years here, a few years there. So we have to think long term as well, and kind of recognize, I think, where we sit in that moment in time.
So how many sheep do you have out here?
Right now, there's some more somewhere.
They're up there. Yeah,
so there's about 20 out here right now.
Okay.
We've gone as many as 70, and that was more when we were selling a little more commercially. And the other thing is, we also have leased pasture land, and so we were grazing 70. We had to get them on pasture a lot more because there's just a lot more mouths. And so we've, in the last few years, decided to just trim down for the time being so that we can put them in the woods more.
Yeah.
Because we can keep up with it a bit better. As this opens up and we get better forage quality, we can actually increase the dry matter per acre, then we can increase our stocking. So that's probably the other thing I always recommend to folks that are just getting into grazing is it's very easy to overstock your landscape and then get super stressed and the animals are stressed, but it's better to start with smaller numbers, figure out what it actually looks like to manage. And every season is different, so you kind of have to, you know, try it out for a few years and then you can kind of figure out the right number so you don't drive yourself crazy.
Can we add that into the conversation of making it a business too?
Yeah.
Because when you start small, I think that's why people scale up so fast.
Right.
Because
Yep,
they're like,
yep.
oh, this is making money.
Yep.
I need to make it make all the money.
Right.
And
Yep.
I'm going to scale up really fast.
Yep.
But then they get overwhelmed. Personal conversation, we get burned out.
Yeah, yeah.
and it can be hard to pull the reins back a little bit.
Right.
So what is your like advice or recommendation on the scaling side of it?
I think it's a question of goals. I don't believe that every activity on a farm should be set out with the goal of making money, and that was a mistake we made from the beginning. Historically, farms have been about subsistence and secondly about a cash crop, right? So I think it's figuring out what activities you want to do and not necessarily pushing them all to that financial limit. If there's an ecological, like I said, our fundamental reason is sort of ecological and to help with management. So that is actually like reducing our costs of mowing, of managing brush, of trying to manage this landscape. And there's more value in that than just trying to raise them for lamb, honestly. For us, it's just been about kind of readjusting our thinking about that. Same with the orchard that we have. I can't imagine managing a commercial orchard, but it's lovely to have, 50 trees that we manage. And on a good year, we have more fruit than we even know what to do with. And we start trading or we give it out to family and friends. So I think some enterprises on the farm can exist in that realm. And then finding those things that like really hit the target with the higher margins and pushing those maybe a little bit harder to meet the financial return. So that's for us been the mushrooms and also our Airbnb rentals, because we didn't plan on that, but found ourselves right in this nexus of a very hot tourism market. So in the summer, we're booked solid through.
Wow.
People love that they can stay on a farm and witness that and just experience that. We don't expect that to be necessarily the market forever, but right now that's much easier to see a margin on than chicken eggs. But we want chicken eggs for ourselves. So I think it's about finding the balance of things for money, things for pleasure, things that benefit the ecosystem, not expecting that they're all going to be the same. And maybe if we were in a different place or if we had more existing pasture, then it would make sense to scale the sheep and do more of a lamb business. But for us, with this kind of situation, the mushrooms are what really we were focused on.
So you've published a few books.
Mm-hmm.
How many books?
2.
2 books. Why did you decide to write a book, and where did that come from?
Well, the first one, Farming in the Woods, was I was working at Cornell for a professor. We taught a class called forest farming, and that was exploring all the possibilities of what one could grow in the woods. So mushrooms are one thing, but there's also things like ginseng or high-value herbal botanicals or medicinals, maple syrup, like other things like that. And he was retiring, and he said, I just want to write this book. Will you help me edit it? And I actually got pulled in more and more to the point where he's like, I think you're a co-author. So it was a lovely experience to co-work on that, and we used our class as a demonstration and the site we were building out as a forest farm on the campus, right?
Yeah.
So that was 10 years ago, and got me just I've always been in. I started out in college as a literature major and always have enjoyed writing. I worked for newspapers. I always liked writing. And just doing this book was like, wow, this is really enjoyable, and we were getting feedback that it was making folks feel like these topics were accessible, like they understood how they could get started or when they should do something or not do something. So it was really rewarding to get that feedback that people were appreciating the shortcut or sort of like getting it explained to them in a way that felt accessible. And that was the same. Silvopasture was one of these things that I was really interested in but didn't find a lot of good information. And so I was like, what a great opportunity for me to research and try to articulate what people are thinking about this in one place, in hopefully a way that makes it feel like people can do this. It's accessible. That's really why I was motivated, and I just enjoy the process. It's not my thinking, it's really collecting what's out there in the world and trying to share that in a way that folks can digest. Actually, this is a really good example of a forest that we don't graze our animals in. So we can see the overstory is so dense that if we ever wanted to turn this into silvopasture, we'd have to thin just way too many trees. And it's also a relatively healthy forest, mostly American beech in here. But you can see some of these beech have really smooth trunks and some have really bumpy trunks. So the ones that are bumpy are actually diseased. And so over time, what we want to do is thin out the diseased ones and leave the really healthy, smooth barked ones. So what's really cool about mushrooms is, again, we can cut down those ones that are diseased and turn them into mushrooms. So these are little stumps that we just made in our class.
Oh.
So it's a slightly different method than with the shiitake logs.
Okay.
All we did is take the mycelium and layer it inside of the wood.
Did you hollow it out? Or
So we really just cut it into pieces and then just do this kind of layering up of them. If we go over there, there's some ones we've done before. You can probably see some of the mycelium. But basically, this will be a little area that we can visit in the fall and hopefully get some lion's mane that are grown in the wood.
Okay.
And at the same time, we're helping the forest. So this is the kind of forest farming I'm talking about. And again, a really good situation for mushrooms. Not a great place to put animals.
And why the bag?
Just to keep critters off of it, basically. Again, just like other logs, it takes about a year before they're really full of that mycelium and can fruit. So these were ones, and it's fine if they fall over. This all happens. Let's see. We had some good ones in the class yesterday, so I may have. Let's see if there's any good examples. This is a good. So it looks like rotting wood, which is what it is.
Oh, but then the
but
spider comes out.
This is actually the lion's mane mycelium in this log, and these will pop lion's mane. Here it's usually about September, October.
Wow.
And so it's funny because it just looks like a pile of rotting wood, but it actually produces these really high value, high quality mushrooms, right?
That's really cool.
That's what I love about it.
So the bugs, are the bugs okay? I see like bugs scurrying about.
It's just what happens. I mean,
it's nature.
We grow indoors, we try to keep every bug out.
Yeah.
Outdoors, we can't ever do that, so it seems to work fine.
So, okay, I want to expand on that real quick. So you said farming, when you're growing indoors, you keep all the bugs out. When you're growing outdoors, you can't help it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the differences then.
Yeah.
On growing inside versus growing outside.
Well, I mean, I mentioned before, growing inside is great because you're kind of keeping the perfect climate, 24/7, 365 in theory.
Right.
So that's good for the mushrooms. The challenge is you're trying to keep it so clean that you can also have moments where a bacteria or another fungus or an insect can sort of run away with it because it's also a desirable habitat for them. And when we're making all the bags, we're cleaning the material, like usually sterilizing it, either with steam or under pressure with steam, or we'll soak some of our straw in like a lime bath, which raises the pH and kind of knocks out any competitive microorganisms. So when we're cleaning it, then we also have to keep everything clean because we're trying to give the mushrooms a leg up.
Right.
So it's this whole process where we're doing that, but we're also inviting pests to show up as well. Yeah, that allows us to grow a wider range of species for a longer amount of time. That's the advantage. The disadvantage is we're constantly managing this building. We're cleaning it every week, making sure the temperature is happy, and the AC will go down, and then we got to fix that or replace that. So there's a lot of management of the environment.
Yeah.
So that's the downside. It's lovely to be out here. We just throw some logs in the woods and we can get mushrooms.
Yeah.
Right. Here's some more. These are shiitake logs that have a strain that only pop out in the spring. So we inoculate these, leave them out here, and we just kind of show up and harvest at the right time of year. That's easy.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about bugs. I don't have to clean anything.
Yeah.
Mother Nature's providing the perfect environment. But again, that harvest time is super short, super narrow. Some years it won't come at all. So the advantage is very low maintenance, very low management. Disadvantage, inconsistent yields.
So if you're trying to make it a business, a consistent business,
but
it can be hard.
Totally. I think most mushroom farms find themselves, though, they have to engage in education, just educating their customers, but also there's a great opportunity to teach others because people are just really fascinated by them. We just did this class. It's really fun to bring a group of 20 people out here. They're not all trying to start businesses. They just want to interact with them. So a lot of these outdoor methods work great for those folks. And so we're really thinking about our mushroom business as an ecosystem. We have our fresh mushrooms, we have our value-added products like the tinctures, and then we have things like education, and all those things together really make the business work. And it takes some pressure off of just, I got to go to every single market and sell every single fresh mushroom, because who has time to do that?
Right.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, so again, these are black pearl oyster.
Okay.
And these we harvest once. So we call them one and done.
Okay.
Because the blocks just produce one nice flush. All of our blocks are composted, and that's actually a really amazing soil. It's almost like worm compost. And you can actually feed them to worms. We don't. But it's really high in organic matter, really high in nutrients, and so that gets recycled back into other systems where we're needing potting mix and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's all very full cycle.
What about the plastic? Is it?
Plastic is not, and that's the hardest thing I think with mushroom farming is single-use plastic. We've grown some of our oysters in buckets before. It's a lot of labor to clean those buckets. There are folks thinking about, and we're really interested in figuring out ways to reduce it, but it is just like a lot of farming really is now relying on plastic, but it is part of that. So we do take it out, and that's a waste product.
Okay.
So these are easy. We just kind of pop them off and clean off the sawdust, and they're good to go.
Can I see the bottom?
Yeah.
So like all of that was sawdust.
Yeah, that was where it attached to the block, and so and then the chef or whoever can do it can just kind of trim
cut
around
that off.
and their mushroom.
Very cool.
And then our lion's mane, they just pop off as well. These will flush twice.
Okay.
And so we can get a nice mix of those. Like it'll flush once, and then usually about a month later flush again. And
so you said you keep these blocks.
Keep the block. It'll go back in. So we're really just harvesting by cleaning off any of that other debris.
Oh, hold on. Yeah, cool.
Getting rid of that, composting that, getting the mushrooms. We'll take them back to the cooler, weigh them, and they'll last in the cooler for a good week or so.
Wow.
And hopefully we're getting them off to a fresh market, and if not, then we got to dry them or process them down into something else.
Okay.
So they have about that, a little longer shelf life than some vegetables, but definitely a quick turnaround. So we'll get some shiitake too, and with these, where was that nice log here?
Over here.
So these were just trimming our mushrooms back, and
are you looking for a specific size?
yeah, it's pretty much like when they're still closed up and kind of little nubs. That's different than when they're nice and open. So the mushroom's like separating from the stem as we go out.
So you mean open like the bottom here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And because they're outside, there's a couple of these thrips in here, so we'll take them back and we just kind of tap them out and clean them a little bit, and they're fine. But it's natural outdoor product, different than indoors. Getting our mushrooms here, and
do you harvest the whole log, or do you just go through?
This log is all ready.
Okay.
So we'll take everything, and then it's gonna need to rest for about 6 or 7 weeks before we can soak it again.
So
we're kind of on a rotation here. Okay. Some of these logs behind us, have been sitting and waiting. Some just fruited and now are resting before they can fruit again. So we soak about 70 to 80 logs a week to kind of keep production up. So maybe.
Here, did you want this one that you got earlier?
Oh yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
See, all these are not quite ready yet.
Okay, because they're still kind of bloomed underneath.
Yeah, and if you look underneath them, they're just not that open. So they still have some some growing to do versus being more open. We try to get them before they're flat so that they last longer in storage and things like that. Timing's key, and on a hot day, it'll go much faster than on a cool day.
Is it kind of like the zucchini in your garden where like you look at it at 5 o'clock and at 5:20 it's way too big?
Totally. It's like, sometimes in the spring we're waiting, and in the heat like this, it's just, we have to be careful not to leave them till maybe evening because they might be overripe.
Okay.
So mushroom farming is, I always say, it's lots of little bits of work. You can't really check it once a day. We're checking often 2 or 3 times a day and harvesting. It may only be for 20 minutes, but that's very different than other things where you might be working really hard on one thing and then not even think about it for a week. Like a lettuce patch or some vegetables or something like that.
Sheep.
You might weed it, or sheep. Remove them, and I don't have to think about it for 3 days.
Yeah.
Mushrooms have that little bits of interaction all the time.
So then what do you do?
So we'll take these. Well, we got a few more to harvest here. Here's some nice big ones. So the size can really vary.
Oh wow, look at those.
So I don't know if you can catch it in the right light. You can actually kind of see them smoking a little bit. I don't know if you'll get it.
Oh, I see it. I don't know if the camera sees it. Maybe Paul can do some enhancement.
That's the spores coming off of these. So
seriously?
It's pretty cool.
Wow.
When the right light hits it just right, it's like a little smoke plume.
That's really cool.
So, again, they're sending that out as like their seeds to try to find a new place. That they won't. Shiitakes aren't from here originally. They're really from parts of Asia. So they don't find themselves naturalizing in the environment in the way they would. And that's actually a good thing. We don't really necessarily want to introduce new species. So the fact they don't grow that fast, the mycelium, it's not really a risk. It's something we can grow.
And that's why you have to inoculate.
Yes, that's why you have to inoculate and kind of cultivate them, not just find them out in the wild.
Where do you get an inoculant?
So there's just like a seed company. You would buy what's called spawn, which is the sawdust medium with the mycelium in it. So that white mycelium is the organism. This is just the fruit of that organism. And so, yeah, you can make it yourself, just like you could save your own seeds from a crop. Typically, it's more cost effective to purchase it from someone who's got the system down.
Do you have to do it every year? Like you have to get new ones every single time, or?
Yeah, so just like you order your seeds every year,
okay.
right? It's
Gotcha.
the same kind of thing where you'd order your spawn and do your next round of logs. Now these I don't ever have to inoculate again. So you do it once and it's good for 3 years.
Okay.
The bags you inoculate, they go through their life cycle, and the indoor is much quicker, right? So those bags are usually in and out in 1 or 2 months, and this is over several years.
Right.
So it's a very different time cycle. But once you've inoculated something, you don't do it again.
Gotcha.
You just keep inoculating new things to keep getting new mushrooms.
Yeah.
Nothing magical here. We just weigh everybody, keep records on what we have, and then get them in the cooler. And all these mushrooms, unlike maybe other produce things, you never want to wrap them in plastic or anything. They are, I think of them as living and breathable, so they want to keep kind of having that and not getting suffocated, which a lot of mushrooms in the grocery store are wrapped in plastic.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason people don't think they like them, is because they may be sitting in plastic for like a month before they get to your plate. Very different having a fresh mushroom that you can eat, like that's been harvested, a few days. So there's a big niche. There are large mushroom farms and big distributors and even imports, but a small local mushroom farm that can provide something really fresh definitely has a market advantage. And
what are you doing there?
this is just to get some of those bugs off. We'll just kind of shake
them out.
Make sure they're all clean before we put them away. So we're doing, a couple 100 pounds a week is kind of our average. And that's enough to sort of sustain a part-time person in terms of like, we have some help, we do some work ourselves. If we wanted to go full-time into the mushroom farm itself, which we don't have that goal, then you'd be looking probably like 400, 500 pounds a week sort of thing as your target, right?
Wow.
So we kind of like to do everything a little bit part-time. Because I don't want to sit at a computer full-time, I don't want to just be doing mushrooms all the time, I don't just want to be moving sheep around, so we like to keep it interesting for ourselves.
I think humans a lot are like that, and we forget that when we're looking at production values on a farm, where we forget that. I had a farmer tell me that he can only do things for like 5 to 10 years.
Right.
And I'm like, I feel that. So I love that you're able to like diversify yourself that way. You do a lot of little things. Yeah.
And what's fun is we've been growing these 3 species now for kind of reliably for like the past 5 years or so. Before that, it was a lot of just the shiitake. So we've kind of added those, and now we're looking at new ones. So what's lovely about mushrooms is we can say, oh, what's new and exciting? What can we try? What do we want to learn how to grow? Because they all take a little bit of a different recipe at the end of the day. So.
And this is your cooler where you store them at?
So these are all different mushrooms ready to be packed up. We'll do our CSA later today and get them out to restaurants and all that for the week.
Yeah. So you said it's like 100 pounds a week. What does
couple hundred pounds a week.
Couple hundred pounds a week. What does that look like as far as revenue, if you're okay talking numbers?
Generally, a couple thousand a week. It's kind of like the gross.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for kind of part-time work, that's not bad.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's our goal, and it's certainly, as far as any of the other enterprises we've done, it's got a much bigger cash flow than the lamb's always challenging, because when we were doing that, it's like you work, and then you only sell it at the end of the year when it's cut up and frozen and in all its cuts. But this is nice because we get kind of that weekly flow. And what we also do is the CSA is something that people start signing up for in January before we even started ramping up for the season. So we kind of get this cash flow early, and then the restaurants kind of sustain us as a weekly thing, and as well as the farmers market. So we also try to think about mixing when that money's coming in. Farmers always need a little more money in the beginning of the season to kind of get going.
Right.
So the CSA really supports us in that way.
Yeah.
And the other things then kind of fill in the gap.
I would imagine that the shiitakes are less expensive to get off the ground compared to getting the bags of the oysters and the lion's mane.
Absolutely.
But how much does it cost, like, I don't know, per bag to do that?
I mean, we've figured out, and it's really important to track your cost and actually what your cost per pound is, so you're not underselling. That's a lot of new folks will just look at the other farms and say, oh, I'll do it for that. And you can find mushroom farms that are selling them for, $3-4 a pound, but a small farm can't produce them at that cost or at that rate. So we found that to make a log, the cost to inoculate a log is about like $5 a log in terms of materials and time. You're going to get about $30 to $40 worth of mushrooms out of that, but over like 3 years. So it's really spread out. That's per log. Still pretty good margin compared to a lot of things, but spread out. And then the bags are similar. It's like $5 to $6 a bag at max to produce. Sometimes we've purchased in bags, so you can actually source bags and just do the fruiting, or you can make your own. So of course, as you make your own, you're going to reduce your cost, but you're also taking on that labor, the learning process, and the possible failure.
Right.
Versus if you buy them in, someone else is taking on that risk.
Right.
So there's lots of different combinations, but yeah, typically they're costing us when we produce them, whether it's a log or a bag, honestly, somewhere between like $4.50 and $6 a unit. And each of those units should be producing 20, 30, upwards of $50 of product off of it.
Wow.
And then if we take that and we can turn 5 pounds of tincture into like $1,000 worth of revenue. I mean, but we have to add that value. There's other things, there's other steps, there's regulations. So all these things look easy and rosy, but you have to kind of walk through each one at the end of the day. No, I think if folks are really excited about any enterprise, but especially mushrooms, just like start slow and make sure you're enjoying the work.
Yeah.
And don't find yourself sort of suffering through it all, because if it's not fun, you're not going to last anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly where Paul and I were at, right? I mean, we were like, this isn't fun anymore. It's a chore. It's exhausting. I don't want to go out and do chores anymore. And that's when we're like, okay, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
We need to take a step back.
And you know, a stat I learned at Cornell when I worked there was, you know, over 90% of farms have some off-farm income. It's not necessarily, and especially when you're starting out, it's not always the best thing to like go all in, right? There's a point when you can make that jump, but it is nice to relieve the pressure and say, okay, we'll find some other sources, we'll find some other streams so that we can do this right for ourselves, for the land, for the markets, like so that we can kind of figure it out. Because it is a huge learning curve and it's really fun, but it can also be really stressful. And I think it's important that we make sure folks don't stress out.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Steve, thank you so much for having me out here. This has been an amazing experience. And now I'm a little excited about mushrooms. Okay. Curious if I can eat them. I'm not sure. One of those things I'm like, I don't want that.
Well, the great secret here is my wife doesn't like mushrooms either, so.
Oh, okay. All right, I'm not the only one. There you go. There you go. But thank you for having me out. I really appreciate it. This has been so cool. And if anybody is looking for more information on you, we'll put all your links in the description. Okay? All right. Thank you. So I was really excited to come here because I just genuinely love learning new things. And when I met him at the farmer's market, I was like, oh man, he's gonna be a wealth of knowledge. And oh yeah, he so is. What he's doing here is cool. The courses he's doing, we could have gone to a course, but we weren't able to go. So I think what he's doing is really cool, but more importantly, it's gotten me excited that there are other things to do in a forest landscape. Paul and I, we really want to retire to the mountains. We, when we're done traveling, when we've seen all of the farms we want to see, we want to retire somewhere, not retire, but we want to start our homestead somewhere on the mountains. And it's very forested there. There's not a lot of flat land. So it's got in us questioning what kind of animals could we have if it's, you know, very forested, very hilly, semi-mountainous. And what he's doing here just gives me so much hope that we can do so many other different things. Mushrooms, for example, I love it. So thank you for coming with me. We have one last New York farm tour, and then we are heading to Vermont. We are excited that you are here with me today, and I can't wait to see you at the next one.